Well, thank you, Nick, for coming on the podcast. Welcome to another episode of Simply Finance. Like I mentioned, I have Nick Hamburger on the podcast today, the co-founder of Quevos. And without further ado, I'll let Nick kind of give a little intro to himself.
Yeah. Well, Shane, thanks for having me. Really excited to be in the podcast. Yeah, my backstory isn't too long. I'm still only 22. I kind of grew up always with different business ideas. My friend Zach, who ended up being my co-founder at Quevos, and we had different ventures. So, like in middle school, we had a little we had these imported sodas from Japan that were really nice, and we kind of sold them at the cafeteria pretty discreetly, just so no one would catch us, and we did get caught and ended up
I
getting
think I
shut down.
saw
But
that. Didn't you guys, weren't you guys on one of the, like the Chicago news stations and you told that story? I think I saw a clip of that
yes,
online.
on Windy
Yeah,
City Live, yeah, we,
that's
we
so
talked
funny.
about that. It was really funny. And then what else? Just kind of traded stock in high school and always had ideas. So Zach came up with the idea of an egg white based chip, um, from his lifestyle as a type 1 diabetic, where he tries to eat low carb, and kind of was inspired from eggs and the crispy pieces of egg that are left when you cook an omelet. And so we ended up entering a business contest at University of Chicago, and that went well. And then we ended up taking time off of school to pursue it.
Awesome. That's so cool. And you guys started it in the fall of 2018. Is that right?
It was actually, that's kind of when we launched on market. The business contest was winter, kind of the beginning of the year 2018.
Got it. Okay. And where does the name come from?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's Spanglish for quick huevos. So huevos is eggs in Spanish, and so it's like eggs on the go.
Oh, love it. Okay. Got it. I've always wondered that. And I couldn't find that anywhere. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, and I was, of course, reading up on, the history and what I could find online. You guys got into the University of Chicago. It was like a startup program, right, to get started. And then you guys also jumped into the Kraft Heinz, or you got picked, I guess, for the Kraft Heinz incubator program. Is that correct too? Is that kind of like how it all kind of spiraled and started?
Yeah, exactly. It was a snowball like that. So we'd had the idea beforehand and done some basic prototype batches, and we'd said, oh, when we graduate college, we'll maybe for a year we'll do this instead of going into a job right away. But then we heard about a business contest at U Chicago. We did that, and it was like a 10-week intensive course, culminated in a pitch competition. So we kind of laid the fundamentals of the business down. Won 15,000 in funding, which isn't much, but it's enough to get you really
Just to
excited.
get
And
started, though, that's a lot. You know what I mean?
yeah, it's true. And especially in consumer products, where you can actually, it's not like some crazy new tech product. Um, and yeah, right after that, so we were still like definitely really engaged and motivated. But then once we applied to the craft program and got in, which was May 2018, that kind of took it to another level. Zach and I made the commitment to be full time with Quevos and leave college, and kind of all took off from there.
Do you remember? I always love asking this to founders, especially for you at the age you did it. Do you remember the conversation with your parents when you said, I want to drop out of school and do Quavos full time?
It's actually really funny because they were introduced to the idea by watching a video of our pitch from the U Chicago competition. So like at the U Chicago competition, someone had asked us the question about, are you going to stay in school or drop out? And at that point, we hadn't quite decided, but the advice we were given was just like, say that you're gonna drop out. So we said we're gonna drop out. My parents weren't at the event, but they were watching a recap of that pitch, and they saw that. They're like, wait, Nick, like you're dropping out, like you didn't tell us that. So but they were. I think they'd known it was a possibility. Plus, I came back to live at home with them. So
Oh, okay.
with those two facts, like it wasn't too shocking for them, and they were supportive.
That makes sense. And that's good you had support. I feel like that's one of the questions I get a lot from people trying to start their own thing is like, how do you handle, negativity, whether that's from family, friends on your idea? So is that something you dealt with at all, or did you pretty much have everyone behind you, backing your idea?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think that is an interesting dynamic, especially when an entrepreneur really is faced with a lot of it, but they kind of go against it. But we didn't have to deal with too much negativity. We had a lot of support from our families, but also like just a lot of people found the concept interesting. And some of these early wins, especially with the craft incubator, kind of like let us know that we were onto something. So didn't have to. There were a lot of challenges making the product taste good and doing the R&D and things like that. But in terms of the uh, support, it was always there.
Did I'm also curious, do you remember like version 1 of the first Quevos like batch? Do you remember you guys look like working through that?
Yeah, like there were a lot of really, really horrible batches early on, and like at the venture contest at U Chicago, we passed around our samples to the judges, and at that point, the main issue was the product was that it was too dry. So it was like at 1% moisture. We did a measurement. And for context, saltines are 2% moisture.
Oh
So it's
wow.
twice as dry as saltines, plus like basically no carbs. So it's protein, which is like even drier than carbs. And yeah, so like they were honestly, I didn't even love the product until we really perfected it closer to our market launch. It really was a struggle for a while.
Yeah, I bet. I was gonna say, do you and if I correct me if I'm wrong, but both of you were not like food scientists or any sort of like food background, were you? Weren't you both in the business school?
Yeah, so actually, we were both undergrad, and actually studying, both of us studying philosophy.
Oh, okay.
So we were not, the course was through the business school though.
Gotcha.
So yeah, no background in food science, or really in business either, but definitely a passion for business.
So what was like step one of figuring out how to like even create this product? Like you have the idea, but without like a background in making food, what would you guys do?
It was just like throwing stuff at the wall. Like we tried, I think at least 7 different cooking processes, and a couple of which, and the process we ended up using, we didn't have the equipment for. We started doing batches at like a manufacturer's test lab. So we tried a lot of processes, and then we also tried, um, I don't know what the number is, at least 200 different ingredients, maybe more,
Oh wow.
just tons of stuff.
200 different ingredients?
We ordered like quinoa flour and cassava flour and pea fiber and just all these random ingredients that we didn't end up going with, but wanted to try everything.
That's wild. Okay. And
Yeah.
then once you guys finally, you're working through this, getting the product, how did you guys decide to go to market? And I guess I'm not even sure if I fully know, what your guys' steps to going to market were. Was it like D2C on your website? How did you guys decide to, really go to market?
Yeah. So I mean, we from a product standpoint, it, got to a place where we felt the feedback was good enough. We went to kind of similar to the RX bar founding story. We went to a lot of CrossFit gyms and
Awesome.
kind of fitness events to get feedback. And then, um, so once it was there, we wanted to start slow and really get even more feedback on, product, but also packaging and sell through and pricing. And so we started with like a dozen stores in Chicago, plus our website, and spent 6 months really just kind of seeing what happened. And it motivated product improvements, but also making the pack a little smaller, reducing the price point, and changing the design of the package.
Oh, awesome. So you actually were able to get some feedback. I mean, yeah, like from the RX story, we get it. We've always gotten a lot of feedback from our D2C site. Like I feel like, that's such a great way to get feedback when you have that, information. You have that, you're able to tap into so much information when it's your own website. Would you do it all over again the same way now that you've kind of, paved your way a little bit?
Honestly, yes, I definitely agree about the site is a nice source of feedback. And also sampling at those stores, you hear a lot. And you don't have to listen to everyone, but you hear the opinions kind of aggregate into different buckets. You're like, okay, I'm hearing this a lot. And this is more of a one-off thing where that person has some, very unique opinions, but they're not applicable to the majority. So um, I like that we went slow. It was a little painful. It was like, can we sell more? Can we go faster? But it ended up being that the final product we had in April of 2019 was a lot better. than what we started with in October 2018. So I am glad we were kind of diligent with that.
No, that's awesome. And then from there, I don't know how much you want to share, but like how has your distribution changed over the last, call it year and a half, 2 years, I guess now, since
Yeah.
then?
Yeah. So we ran a Kickstarter in April 2019, which was kind of like, all right, we finished this market test, we've got our final product, but we knew it would take some time to scale up we manufacture ourselves. So we had to scale up the production line to be higher volume, had to hire some more staff. We knew that would take a few months. So we ran a Kickstarter while we were doing all that, and fulfilled that in August of 2019. So since August of last year, we've gotten into about 400 stores. Whole Foods, Illinois being probably the one I'm most proud of.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, but also Heinen's and Wegmans and Hannaford. So kind of Midwest and Northeast distribution
Fantastic.
base.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
awesome. Since this is a finance podcast, this is funny. You're like the third founder in a row that's done a Kickstarter, I believe.
Hmm.
Would you mind explaining? I think it's important for people, especially that we have a lot of non-finance people that listen to this that just want to learn more about either starting a company or investing or whatever. Can you
Sure.
explain a little bit how the Kickstarter process works and just like how that whole thing, comes to fruition?
Yeah. So it's basically like crowdfunding, but you don't get anything for it besides for like packages of product. There's other sites where you can actually get a piece of the company. But with Kickstarter, you have different reward tiers, and so I think we had a $20 and a $45 or $50, and then you just go up and up. The highest one was like a $500 huge pack of like 200 chips or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so it's a lot of people I think are buying more to support the company. They're interested in the product, but it's like um, there's these super backers who will be on Kickstarter and just wanting to support different companies all the time. So yeah, it's a really cool platform because you do get a customer base that ideally likes your product and then is kind of a fan base over time. Um, but also you kind of yeah, it can just really help with exposure early on, or in a case like ours where you have a few months and um, you're unable to manufacture and sell high quantities at that time, and you kind of want to get pre-orders.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you can I get it. Yeah. So it's for everyone listening. So you can people can decide what tier they want to invest in. And then instead of getting equity, they just get like the first batch of that product that was created from that. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And
Okay.
sometimes it's things that you really can't get, unless you back on Kickstarter, right? It
Sure.
can be more special than just an order on Amazon.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. That's awesome. Did that kind of springboard you guys into the next level, next phase for Quevos? You think that was a successful decision to move for someone, at your guys' stage?
I think it was definitely helpful. It probably wasn't. I don't think we'll look back as it's something that we were living or dying based off it, but it was kind of like, I feel like early on, you're always every couple months you want some success to talk about to investors and to buyers and just to everyone who's asking you how's the business doing. So like, if we hadn't done that, we would have kind of just been planning stuff for 4 months, but have
Hmm.
had no product to sell because the facility was being uh, worked on. So I think it was really nice that like for those next couple months where we were literally selling nothing, we could still talk about all the product we'd pre-sold.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Have you guys one of my questions I wrote down was I'm always curious of this. Egg white foods. I feel like there's not a ton of them. Like, I mean, I know RX, I feel like we were one of the in protein bars, one of the first to do that. You
Yeah.
guys have the chips. What's your thought? And you've worked obviously in like the Kraft Heinz incubator program. What do you think? And this might be a dumb question, but why have larger food companies not tried to get into this space?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know about our space specifically, but I think in general, the food companies just seem to be really risk averse. And they're not open to trying things in small, nimble ways because it's so like they kind of have I think a little bit of a fixed view of like, well, if this isn't $1 billion brand,
Hmm.
why would we launch it? And so like
Right.
they'll launch new things if they're committed to a Walmart national launch. Like that's a new launch. They will never test something small in 200 stores. They just don't want to deal with something at that small of a scale. But I think because they don't do that, they're not like really connected to different early adopter groups, and they're not really listening for what's next. And so then they end up just either they only launch something when it's big enough that they know it'll work, um, and so they're not like the first brand in that space, or they just buy, the breakout brands.
Right, right. Yeah, they can kind of save some time. And that's what another I've had a few founders say that just seems like, to your point, it's just not worth the time and investment if it's not a big enough dollar chase, essentially. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
which I don't know. I mean, I think that's not. I think it's a flaw, and it's something that like it's being exploited by small companies. But you could have. I think we're going to see in the coming years some sort of startup, or maybe it's an RX bar type stage brand that hasn't yet sold, start to make some sort of incubator where they kind of are launching 30 things at once. And I think that's the future, because the millennial and Gen Z population, like, I think are fickle, and they like new things, and they always want the new. So like, I think there'll continue to be every 5 to 10 years all these different brands popping up, and you want to be able to um, get in on the ground floor instead of having to buy something when it's big and hope it stays big.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. Because you think probably some of those big food brands are going to miss out on a lot of some of that growth too. If by the time
Yeah,
they purchase, it'll be interesting too to see how many more of the food brands have these major exits. We keep seeing them. Like I know recently, like Vital Proteins had a big one. A lot of the
yeah.
bar brands have had big ones. I'm interested to see like what the future of that looks like too. To your point, like when do they become? When does an incubator pop up, or when does some of that kind of go over the edge?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I've heard that the multiples are going to come down. Like our Bar got a 5x multiple on their sales, and a lot of companies get 4 or 5x. But I've heard it's going to come to 2 to 3x, just because a lot of companies, these big companies, keep getting burned because
Yeah,
the brand will not sustain the crazy trajectory they had been on.
right.
So we'll see. It'll be interesting.
It will be very interesting. I definitely agree. Did you, and so you dropped out of U Chicago. The other thing I was thinking was, did you end up going back? Did you ever go back to finish your degree? Are you planning on ever doing that? Or do you think Quevos and then other, adventures are in your horizon?
I'm hoping to never have to go back. And don't tell my parents that. That's the part that they're not on board with yet. But Zach did go back after 1 year off. So, and he's
Okay.
actually at Williams College in Massachusetts. So he decided to go back. But for me, yeah, I'm just going to stick full time with it, and then hopefully, won't have to resume studies ever.
Got it. There you go. So how big is the team now at Quevos?
Yeah, so it is two people full time only, me and Jess, who came from our Bar, who
Yep.
you know pretty well. And we have a lot of freelancers, as well as now I think 8 full time production staff at
Oh, there you go.
making the product. So yeah, we're super lean, and hoping to stay really lean. One of our mentors is the founder of Skinny Pop, and he has like this um, almost historically lean team, or they had like just this crazy lean team when they sold for hundreds of millions to a private equity company. They only had a couple full time, and then a external sales team. So we're trying to emulate that model. I think that I don't know. I just think we're not the highest margin item. So if we can stay leaner as a staff, and that's kind of one way to make up for that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think, especially I feel like in CPG, you can really, I don't know, you gotta be careful to not overhire too quick too. I've seen some
Yeah,
of that. You can kind of jump ahead of where you're trending in sales, and yeah, the leaner you can stay. Are you guys kind of trying to just like essentially hire when you guys are bursting at the seams and need help in some area? I'm assuming.
a little bit. Yeah, hopefully before it's total chaos and everyone's stretched too thin. But that's the general mentality. Is if we can test something with a freelancer, or with me doing it with 20% of my time, we will. And then, oh, okay, it's going well. It justifies someone, part time or full time. But um, yeah, to avoid just kind of hiring where we think we might need it soon, and more be hiring where we really need it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, what does, I feel like you guys have been on, on a tear getting new distribution. What's your thoughts on, I'm sure you have one and you don't have to share anything, proprietary on here, obviously, but are you guys thinking, is distribution the kind of like the plan for the next couple years? Is it like new product innovation or both? Or, what's like the next year, 2 years look like for Quevos?
Yeah. While we do have a lot of ideas for innovation, we want to stay focused on the chips for now. Like our X bar, like Skinny Pop. Ideally, your trajectory is just the same one product, a couple different flavors in more and more and more stores. I think that's when it's going really well. We will add those products at some point, but hopefully in a few years. So yeah, kind of just getting more distribution and also seeing what the limit online is, because traditionally for brands like ours, it's probably somewhere between 5 and 10 million in sales where you kind of can't get past that on Amazon. But with this huge switch to Amazon and the increased consumer ordering there, we're hoping it's maybe a higher maximum.
Yeah, that makes sense. How has COVID impacted you guys in that degree? Like, have you had, has e-com really taken off? Have you guys had a switch? I'm curious how it's affected you guys.
Yeah, our ecom is getting close to double what it was in early March, which is pretty exciting. But it wasn't directly from COVID, but kind of mid-April, we launched some influencer campaigns, and those have been massively effective for us.
Oh, that's awesome. So it's probably
Yeah.
great timing mixed with a great idea.
Yeah, I think exactly. It's like I bet the influencer's been more effective just because more people have been on their phones and on social media. And but yeah, we actually were down like from mid March to end of March. We had a couple terrible weeks, and we're kind of freaking out. Like, oh my God, is it what's going on? Are people not buying premium snacks because maybe they lost their job or they're anticipating the recession? But thankfully, we were able to pick it back up.
That's awesome. No, that's great. I know Amazon for us at our X bar has been crazy. It's
I'm
so
sure.
wild to just see the switch that people are just moving, and it's like across all e-commerce platforms. Are you guys on like Walmart.com or any of the other platforms in e-commerce right now?
Some wholesale marketplaces, but no, yeah, just Amazon on our site. But that is interesting, and I'm not surprised because I mean, our X, right? There's so many, probably millions of shoppers at this point who were used to buying it in store who probably just transitioned to Amazon.
Yeah, I think just like as people are, I think people are just so unclear on like what the next week looks like with COVID at this point. I think people are feeling like it's just safer and safer to either go online or, or purchase from, any of the like delivery services too. We've seen those pick up a lot. It's really interesting to see like just the buying patterns change. Um, and I think to your point, like you said, I think we were kind of thinking the same thing. It's been interesting to see. I've been trying to follow along with a lot of premium brands in our food space, just on like how everyone's handling COVID, because I think we're all kind of in the same boat where it's interesting to see, extremely high unemployment with people trying to still buy premium brands. It's been an interesting dynamic and like how to maneuver through that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be interesting to see kind of, well, we need to see how the economic conditions play out. But I know in the 08, 09 recession, natural products still did like just as well. So, hopefully there wouldn't be too much of a dip for any of us if a recession kind of lasted a while.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be interesting because I think out of something like a pandemic, people are even more inclined to try to be healthy. Like I feel like that's probably been another, at least that's what I've been picking up on, is the
Hmm.
people I talk to and run around with. I think exercise and eating better is just becoming like even more important with the worry of getting sick. So, at the end of the day, maybe it'll benefit the category to some degree as well. Um, yeah, I don't know. Another question I was curious on for you, I like asking in this founder series, this question is, when you guys were getting started and you had the concept, I mean, you guys did a business, you did like the business competition, and then you got picked up by the Kraft Heinz competition. Did you guys, was your like mentality, and this might have been like not even a thought at first, you guys were just trying to figure it out, but were you guys more thinking you wanted to bootstrap the business? Have you guys always tried to go find investors? Like, how have you guys managed that? Because I think depending on who you talk to in the food, especially the food space, there's like some back and forth opinions on like the right way to do it. But just curious of your thoughts.
Yeah. I think we would have loved to bootstrap if we were in the position to do it. It's not great for this product given that we use some special equipment, and so we knew we kind of had to buy that. Plus, we were college kids without, we weren't coming off decades in the food industry,
Right.
so we couldn't have financed much ourselves. So yeah, we started raising, even before that market test. We had begun to raise, and did a seed round through, I guess, fall 2018 into winter 2019, and then are now raising our seed extension round.
Oh, nice. Okay. There you go. So do you guys think you'll do a few more rounds of funding then through that as you guys continue to grow?
I think we can get to profitability off of what we've raised in this round if we want to, but kind of are looking to raise big rounds, one or two more in the future, to fund major national launches in retail. So,
Okay.
it's just a function of trying to move as quickly as we can. And if we waited 2, 3 years and just built up a base of profit, we could do it without raising. But I think, the clock is ticking, and we want to make sure we get this product out there.
Right. Do you guys, I know you said you're working on distribution, Whole Foods. I'm sure that's a huge one. That's fantastic for you guys. Um, are you guys, is in the pipeline to some degree? Are you guys have thought at all about like mass or club or any of these other huge visibility places? Or are you trying to like slowly build the base first?
Yeah, definitely. There's both ways of doing it, right? Like, you could build up a hugely loyal audience and like make sure you've, built like market by market before you go national. But I don't know. I think we look at brands like Hippies and others where, they kind of get to national pretty quick. And so that's what we're hoping to do. Still haven't decided if it'll be more of like a conventional Kroger type store, or a Costco type setting for our product, that gets us to national. But one of the two, and hoping for something like Q3 of next year to start working with a major national chain.
Exciting. That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, it sounds like you guys have quite the path of success. That's awesome.
Thank
Um,
you.
the other would kind of like to spin it back. A couple of the questions I like to ask on here too are a little more like entrepreneurial, starting up questions. And one of the ones that I've gotten questions on that people like me to ask is, if you're someone who has an idea or concept, for you guys, it was Quevos, obviously. What's your suggestion to listeners on taking that step from going to 0 to 1? So just like from the concept to like actually, going through with making something, or even just evaluating whether it's worth your time and energy. Could you kind of just explain to all the listeners kind of like your perspective on that and how you guys went about that with Quevos?
Yeah. I think it really is listening to the potential customer. So identifying who the potential customer would be, and making sure you're asking them the right questions. I have a friend right now who's developing a concept, and I've seen him do a really nice job of this, where he's DMing people on Instagram who buy a similar product, and he's saying, "Will you get with me on the phone with me for 10 minutes?" And the questions you ask that potential customer are important too. You don't want to ask, "Here's my idea. Would you buy it?" Like, they're going to say
Right.
yes. They're going to be nice to you. You got to do things to get around that a little bit, but I think very important to be thorough at the beginning, with that. Making sure you're building something for kind of an avid customer base, and then you know doing the early testing as quickly as possible is nice. I think if you can get something that's not that pretty but functional out there and just test that, I guess that's kind of the Mark Zuckerberg philosophy,
Hmm.
of what he would do in college with different ideas, and just code something in a week and have people use it and see what they say. Versus, I've seen, fellow entrepreneurs at U Chicago spend like a year and a half coding something and never releasing it. And it's like, it doesn't need to be perfect. And, the more a lot of times you're perfecting something to your own vision, but you never asked anyone, is that how they want it to look? Or, a lot of times to get that feedback, you just need to put something out there. It doesn't have to be pretty. So I really am a fan of kind of learning as much as you can from your target customer as quickly as you can.
So really the minimal viable product kind of mentality. That
Totally.
makes sense. And that's cool that your friend, the idea of DMing people that buy similar products. Do you know how he even goes about doing that? That's such an interesting way to go about it. I like that.
Yeah, well, he's developing like a bracelet that vibrates and reminds you to whatever you want it to remind you to do. But in for most people, probably it's about mindfulness and remembering you're alive and taking a breath. And so he was DMing people who use Headspace,
Oh, okay.
and meditation apps.
How do you even like how do you get your hands on that information? How can you see who's buying?
Oh, I think you can see who's following Headspace on Instagram, and then
Okay,
just yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah, yeah, obviously, yeah. If you go to the followers of a brand, it's probably a pretty good chance that they're using that product. That's a great
Yeah,
point.
totally.
Yeah,
So, but I just think like, I had people my age, people in college interested in entrepreneurship will ask me about different ideas that they have, and someone approached me the other day with an idea that was like good, but didn't seem like anyone would actually use. It'd be really hard to get users, and it's just like he'd probably asked a bunch of friends, and they're like, "Yeah, it's cool," and I agreed it was cool, but it just was so kind of impractical and would require a lifestyle change. So I don't know. I feel like you've got to make sure you've got something that has a potential really avid user base. It can be mass market eventually, but you're going to need to start somewhere. So you want to make sure you kind of have that early adopter group outlined.
definitely. That makes sense. So you really finding out who your core consumer could be or would be by testing that kind of in a small sample size or group. That makes
Hmm.
sense. Is Has there been anything, in the 2 years you really, a little over 2 years, you've been working on Quevos, that you've learned that you would suggest to a young new entrepreneur that maybe, a lesson learned that you could pass on?
Mm, definitely lots of things. What we just spoke about is important. Making sure you're building something for someone and then testing, as quickly as you can, getting feedback and testing. Um, you know, what else? I mean, I think having like, uh, always having a sense of like, what's the next thing that needs to happen and doing that first and not, um, there's so many things you can think about or explore or so many plans you can make, but kind of like, I feel like things have gone relatively fast because on my mind, I'm always like, okay, like end of the day, we're getting to here. This is the first step on the million step journey is this. I'm going to do that today. Like just being very narrowly focused. And I've gotten better at that over time as the opportunities are growing, right? There's so many more things we can always be doing and places we can be selling. But, um, zeroing in on what are the top couple of priorities and really doing those first before you get to the 100 other emails you could be replying to.
Yeah, that makes sense. To help you with that, do you use any like tools, apps, journals, any like strategies?
Yeah, it's evolved over time, and I kind of don't hold myself to anything specific, but just see what's helpful at that moment. So like, I do have a big to-do list that's just on like the Notes app on Apple, um, and then I have a Google Doc with like a broad strategy that I'll update sometimes, but it varies. I mean, at times I've had a ton of post-its like all across my desk, and I've moved away from that because that was just a lot. But just whatever I can find helps me to kind of remember my top four priorities and then like spend most of my time on them.
No, that's great. I get really into that. I've tried all kinds of different stuff, so I'm interested to hear what founders use because I mean, I always feel like my day's busy, but like running a company's got to be, you just have so many different things. Do you try to this is another curiosity from for someone who runs a company. How do you manage like I'm sure you do some sales, some marketing, some R&D. How do you like try to manage that in a week? Do you have like certain days where you do certain things, or do you just kind of bounce around and get shit done, or like how do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think I would probably benefit if I did organize it like, Monday is for sales and Tuesday is for R&D and Wednesdays for fundraising or something, but it's more like on my top couple priorities, I'm just like, okay, I need to make sure I've basically advanced everything on my end as far as I can in the bucket of fundraising, sales with the 3 stores we're trying to land, and and like launching an online marketing campaign. And so a lot of times it's like, all right, I've sent the emails I need to send, and now like I'm waiting on responses. But and so then I can go do other stuff. But trying to make sure I've like caught up on my end with the top couple priorities is what I try to keep top of mind.
Gotcha. Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's great. um I have a few more questions. I think the next one was going to be, so I mean I'm in Chicago as well, and I'd be curious, where's like the easiest place to go get Quevos right now? You mentioned a
Yeah.
few major retailers, but curious of like where you're at across the Midwest.
Yeah. So Whole Foods in Illinois, we're in all those stores. which I'm so thankful for, because beforehand we do have a lot of independents as well, like Peach Fresh Market and Heinen's um, and honestly just a lot of stores that you can find on our locator. But like everyone was always like, "When are you going to be in Whole Foods, man?" I'm like, "That's where I shop." So I think for
It's
a
a
lot of
big
people
one.
that'll be the most convenient spot. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, I feel like getting the Whole Foods business has got to be one of the big check marks for most, people in our space. Just that's such a big one. So,
Yeah,
congrats again on
it's
that. That's awesome.
thank you. Thank you.
Um, so really, I have like a few last questions I like to ask people. The one that I think is interesting, and this isn't meant to put you on the spot in any way, but if you had one book to gift somebody, so whether any topic, anything, do you have like a favorite book that you recommend the most to people?
Yeah, I would say the book "Wherever You Go, There You Are" by John Kabat-Zinn. Not about business. It's I'm just really into meditation and mindfulness, and I found that to be, even the more I meditate, like it's pretty simple, but it's just such a great summary of a lot of the attitudes you're trying to cultivate with mindfulness, and um, just very well written. So I love that book, and it's meant a lot to me.
Awesome. I'll have to add that one to my list. Speaking of meditation, because I think it's a cool topic. What apps, tools do you use for meditating?
Yeah, I bought my mom had bought actually a set of 6 CDs from a teacher named Joseph Goldstein, and I started using those in high school. And so then eventually, like I've done some retreats, so now I kind of usually do my own thing. Sometimes I'll use the Waking Up app from Sam Harris, and I found that to be good too.
Awesome. Yeah, I've used I don't think I've used Waking Up. I've used Oak, which is like a different similar, I think it's Kevin Rose maybe.
Oh, cool.
Um yeah, and I have never tried Headspace, but always curious. So Waking Up. Okay, that's a good one. Um the next one was, and you've kind of answered this a couple times, but just to reiterate, how can people try Quevos? Is there anything, you'd point people to try their first, bag of chips?
Yeah, I think uh, Amazon's probably the easiest for people, but Whole Foods too if you live in Illinois, or Wegmans on the East Coast. And um, if I had to make my personal recommendation, I'd say Cheddar. It's a crowd pleaser, usually one of our more popular ones.
Awesome. Awesome. And then if people want to get a hold of you or just Quavos in general, what do you suggest doing that?
Yeah, I mean, if it's in general, you can email like team@quevos.com. That's like our general mailbox. I'm Nick@quevos.com, Nick, if someone needs to reach me directly. So, um, it's still at the stage where I can give out my email and hoping to get to one where,
There
uh,
you go.
I shouldn't anymore. But yeah, definitely happy to respond to anyone.
No, like that goes likewise. Hopefully someday this podcast will be a platform that people don't want to hand out just their email. So we're
Yep,
on the
yep,
same page.
exactly.
Well, that's really all I have, Nick. I was really pumped to talk to you. I appreciate you giving me the time. I know you're a busy man. So thank you for coming on and talking about Cuevos. I think people are going to love hearing the story and learn a little bit about you and your entrepreneurial journey. So thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, thanks, Shan. Really, really was fun to be here, and good luck
All
with
right.
your career and also with growing the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. And good luck with Quavos. I'm excited to go pick some up. I've actually tried them once. Someone brought in a ton of them to RX one time. I don't know if you
Oh,
guys sent some
nice.
in or what, but they were like all over the office, like probably a year ago now. So
Really?
yeah, it was funny.
That's pretty funny.
I was talking to Jess about it too, and she said it wasn't her. So it was really funny. One day there was like all over the kitchen, and so a bunch of people tried
Wow.
them.
That's
So
funny. At very early on when we used to like monitor every email sign up to our email list, someone had signed up from our expert. We're like, oh my God, they're watching us. Like they're gonna copy our product or something.
that's
But
funny.
yeah, I guess I mean, hey, I've had hundreds of RX bars, so the egg white gang's got to stick together.
That's right. 100%. That's what we loved
Yeah.
when we saw them in there. We're like, all right, this is one of ours. This is good.
Yeah,
This is good.
exactly.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate the time, and thank you for giving us the time today on Simply Finance. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks,
have a
Shane.
good one, Nick. Thank you.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
See ya.